I believe that we have been observed and monitored for a long, long time. I think what we call the UFO phenomenon probably goes through our entire history. For me, when I look at ancient, advanced, like ridiculously, inexplicably advanced technology, the one thing I continue to go back to is the Great Pyramid at Giza. There is, in my view, not any conventional explanation for this at all. When you start getting into the mathematics, the engineering, the geographic location of it, among many, many other things, this indicates to me that whoever built that pyramid knew that the Earth was a sphere. They knew exactly where they were in relation to the entire world. They had engineering and transport capabilities that no one is able to explain. They completed a task that not a single human civilization could possibly have done until possibly the last 100 years. It's even a stretch to ask ourselves, could we have duplicated this today? Maybe we could, but could we have even done it as recently as 100 years ago? Could the United States of, say, Teddy Roosevelt have built the Great Pyramid? The answer is no. It's no. They couldn't have done it. They couldn't have done it with the precision and the exactitude. So I asked myself, if the ancient Egyptians were more advanced than America of the early 20th century, then there's something wrong here with this picture. So there's something in the mix of our civilization that we're not getting. There's a hole in our ancient history, and some of that includes very advanced knowledge.
Based on my research, I believe that the beings are advanced approximately close to 1 million years. And the reason why I say that is because if you study the ancient tablets, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the ancient Vedas, and also the Sumerian tablets, you find that the technology that they used was so far advanced. They had technology that can destroy an entire planet. They had vehicles that can travel intergalactically. And you can even see some of the evolution in the Sumerian text. You can tell that they were a little bit less advanced than some of the older texts, because you can see the evolution of their technology, where when they first splashed down 450,000 years ago, they had a lot of rumblings and sounds and noises when they would take off and land. Then closer to around 2000 BC, you find that they're hovering silently, almost like anti-gravity, whisper, quiet. So you can even see the advances in their technology as the millennia went on.
There are a number of very compelling stories that I believe that have to do with NASA encounters with extraterrestrials in relation to the moon. I'm reminded of the story relating to Neil Armstrong, a woman at a function where Neil Armstrong was present eavesdropped on a conversation that Neil Armstrong was having with another person, a doctor of some sort. And the impression I get is that she was standing maybe 10 feet away while this conversation took place. And the doctor said to Neil Armstrong, the question probably everyone in the world would want to ask, what really happened on the moon? To which Neil Armstrong said, and this is quoted in books and it's on the web, essentially that we were watched the whole time that we were on the moon. There were craft there, they were huge, these babies were huge, they were menacing.
On September 12, 1991, NASA launched Space Shuttle Mission number 48. 3 days into the mission, as they were deploying the Upper Atmosphere Research Satellite, something odd was caught on the shuttle's camera.
The footage that was seen from the Space Shuttle mission STS-48 is highly interesting and one of the best smoking guns that we have for proof of UFO activity taking place in lower Earth orbit and countermeasures against those UFOs from someplace here on Earth. While the shuttle was drifting over Alice Springs, Australia, we see this very clear orb of light that is moving slowly through the atmosphere, and then the orb suddenly jumps to life and makes non-Newtonian movement, meaning movement that would normally destroy everything inside, and right after it makes that movement, some kind of particle beam shoots up from the Earth's surface and actually illuminates the entire atmosphere in that process, because there's so much energetic charge on it.
This has every hallmark of being an effort to shoot down an ET-piloted vehicle, in which case they would then send someone like Sergeant Clifford Stone to go in and retrieve the wreckage and the dead or alive extraterrestrial beings in the craft.
But it was half out and half in, and I could tell that it was dead.
The Brookings Institute is one of Washington, D.C.'s oldest think tanks. In the early 1960s, they were tasked by NASA to answer a single question. What would happen to humanity if we discovered evidence of alien activity in outer space? Their answer became known as the Brookings Report.
In 1960, a think tank called Brookings Institution came out with a special report in which they had gone in and investigated the question of disclosure and the widespread revealing of the existence of ET civilizations visiting the Earth. Based on the classic radio broadcast of the War of the Worlds that was hosted by Orson Welles, in which people thought that they were being invaded by ETs and started freaking out. This and other events made the Brookings Institution conclude that they could not tell us the truth because it would be a fatal blow to the stability of civilization as we know it.
Rumors that there was a close encounter with aliens at Holloman Air Force Base have been swirling since at least the 1970s. There is even a supposed film of the flying saucer landing.
There was an alleged contact between extraterrestrials and the U.S. military-industrial complex that took place at the Holloman Air Force Base. And what's interesting about this particular case is that this group of extraterrestrials seems to have a very elaborate headdress that was on, as well as unusual faces that were kind of very small with pronounced nasal features. These ETs, like many of the others, did apparently want peace and wanted to negotiate some sort of positive settlement for Earth's problems, but as is the case, they want disarming of nuclear weapons, the truth told to the people, and the government just laughed in their faces.
When we start getting into the highest level echelon of the cover-up of the UFO phenomenon, I still feel that I need to be careful and researchers need to be careful. Who's the actual person at the top of it? Is it David Rockefeller? Is it some member of the Rothschild family? Is it some member that we don't know about within the deep black budget community? Or is it the aliens themselves in one form or another? I guess we can ask ourselves, what is the likelihood that the non-human intelligences that are behind the UFO phenomenon are managing the cover-up to some extent? I think we could say a few things. One, we can say they do not have an interest in being out there, in being publicly acknowledged. They do operate by stealth. I think they've always operated by stealth. So they have an interest in maintaining a cover of secrecy. Toward that end, if I were tasked with doing counterintelligence on the cover-up, I would have to consider the likelihood that they themselves have some role to play in the secrecy. There is a story about a famous murdered remote viewer by the name of Pat Price back in the 1970s. Pat Price was possibly the best remote viewer the United States ever had. He was an off-the-charts remote viewer. He was that good. He had one of the rare abilities to read alphanumeric information. That is, in other words, he could read documents and file cabinets and things like this. He was extremely, extremely proficient. On one occasion, he did, on his own, he said, some remote viewing work on where alien bases were here on planet Earth. He strolled into the office in the mid-70s of Hal Puthoff, who was running the program, and said, "Oh yes, by the way, I thought I would just on my spare time look to see where the alien bases were." This is true, he said this, and he identified several. They were all basically in mountain areas. So one was in the Pyrenees, one was in Mount Hayes, Alaska, and he said regarding that base, the Mount Hayes, Alaska base, he said that has political protection in the United States government. He said they have their people in the U.S. government who are making sure that no one pries in on that base. That particular base, the way Pat Price described it, was somewhat similar to how you might look at the base in the Hollywood movie Men in Black, you know, the huge alien depot where all the different races go, and humans as well. Not quite, I don't think he described it with quite the humor that you get in the movie, but in other words, a big transit point. And in fact, what Pat Price said to Puthoff about that base is when he was remote viewing it, they began remote viewing him, and he pulled away out of fear. So if that's true, then that would seem to indicate to me that there is some level of collaboration and or control that is being exercised by them within our society. Pat Price, I think, was certainly murdered in the mid-1970s. I think there's no question about this. When people look into the circumstances of his death, it looked like he was poisoned with a cup of coffee in a Las Vegas hotel.